If you are not following Mishaal, he has an incredible book based on all of your own personal experiences, the Phantom CISO. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you, Christine. All right, slides are up. Let's talk about OSINT. Let's talk about hunting for data using APIs. This is one of the techniques that I discovered through curiosity, and OSINT is mostly about curiosity to find out where you can get more data. My background is quite technical, so I've done a lot of pen testing, and that's kind of how I discovered this by doing web application pen testing. But I do a lot of open source intelligence, so I use whatever data is at my disposal. I do a lot of different types of ethical hacking. I'm a nerd in general. I do a lot of coding, so that helps in what I'm about to show you. And I use that knowledge today to advise to clients either on the cybersecurity side as a virtual CISO or on the privacy side as a privacy advocate and an advisor. So, with that, today I'm going to talk about a few things in OSINT, specifically APIs and how I use/abuse APIs for my own purposes. So as you can see, OSINT is pretty vast. It has so many sources. It's not just Googling. So it's finding data through data brokers, through government websites. Anytime you get a speeding ticket, guess what? There's a portal out there to put in your basic information, like a name and maybe a zip code, or sometimes just a name, and you get a lot more information, like an address. Voter records have all that data behind them as well. So there's so many ways to get data. Today I'm going to talk about websites. So what are they leaking based on the APIs and how to discover those APIs? So let's talk about unveiling some APIs. So before I get into apps specifically, let me show you my screen here. Let me give you an example. This is a GitHub repository of Signal. It says github.com/signal. So the first part of the URL is the username, or yeah, the username of the GitHub account. And then the second part of the URL, signal-android, is the repository. So those are the two things you need to know what I'm about to show you. So in any GitHub repo, you see the entire code, but you don't see some of the hidden information here. It's behind an API. So for example, if I need to know what the email address of this person who pushed this code, let's say Cody is, I don't see it in the web interface. Since I'm a coder, I do know that when I do git commands on a command line interface, there is a way to look at the hash and look at all that stuff. And I do see emails, but here I don't. So how do I find that? Well, fortunately, GitHub has a free API, which is basically, let me just copy this part, Signal and Signal Android in memory, because I'm going to add something to this URL. So just add api.github.com, and then it's a slash repos slash signal slash Android, and then slash commits. When you go to that specific URL, that's the API. And it's giving me like a JSON output. And each line item here, I think it only gets you the first 500 commits or the last 500. So if I start expanding this, I'll see the details. And there's a lot of like details inside the commit, the name, and I see the email address right here of the person. Now, this email address wasn't there on the web interface. And I see a whole bunch of other stuff. If I do expand all, it just expands everything. And I can just do Control F and search for the word email, and I can just keep pressing enter, and I see all the different commits with all the email addresses there. I see a different name now, and this is basically exploring what the API has. This API is free, no authentication required. It's just a means to get some more information. Now, knowing this and knowing a little bit of coding, I can kind of automate some of this stuff, and I can go in a command line terminal like this, and I can type in a command like this, like a curl command. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I'll just read through it. It's basically a curl command that's pulling through that same web API. So API github.com/repo/whatever. And I'm doing a grep command. So I'm basically just extracting the email addresses. And if I press enter, it extracts all these email addresses for the user. So this is the simple login app commits, and I see a bunch of email addresses ending with proton.ch. Proton owns it now. But if I add to this URL sort-u to this command, rather, I just get unique email addresses. Let me do that again to clear the terminal. So I get maybe four email addresses that were unique in there. And this way I can now extract information. This stuff was actually useful in an investigation once. So I was investigating a missing person, and that person actually had a GitHub repository. He was a coder, and I needed to know more info about him. And we didn't have all his email addresses, we had a few. So I did this technique on that person's GitHub repo, and I found a new email address that popped up for this perpetrator, which we could then use to pivot further. So little techniques like this take you a little bit further into investigations, and every little inch that you go further into an investigation can help progress it. So that's basically the gist of web and web APIs and how you can get information from it. Now let's take this one step further. Now that I know stuff like this exists, let's go into more detailed stuff. As an investigator, I often have license plate numbers or vehicle information. How do I extract it from websites? Well, I was exploring this website, O'ReillyAuto.com, one day, and there's a section here called Garage, and I click on this, and let me see if I can zoom in a little. Yeah. And you can put in your plate number. So they try to make it easy for you to select your vehicle. They'll extract it for you. I'm like, all right, so California is my plate. I can put a license plate number here, let's say hacker. And before I hit enter, let me right click, inspect, and let me go through the network tab and see what's really going on. What APIs are being hit in the background? So I'm on the network tab now. I'm going to hit search, and it shows me, it's filtered here. So one get request was there. So it actually showed me a vehicle. 2007 GMC Sierra is the one that has the plate, California plate hacker, unfortunately. And here's the little get request at the bottom. And I can see the get request. I can see what the request was. It was basically just the URL and the response. So the response you can see on the right, it's raw. Let's make it like this. And I see the response just had the plate number and everything else in it. Now I can automate this over and over. I can copy the value from the browser and do a copy as curl. And I can go back in a window like this, command line interface, and paste it. When I paste it, it copies all the headers and everything. It's a long command. But if I press enter, I get the same result back, plate number and everything. And I can now modify this one by one. So if I want to see what this request was, I just open up a notepad and I can see, all right, this was the curl request. What if I modify this hacker or the California plate to, let's say, Florida plate, and copy this whole request again, paste it in a command line terminal, and paste it. Okay, now it's a Volt. It's a Chevrolet Volt that has this plate number, Florida hacker. So now I'm starting to extract APIs, starting to manipulate them to get the results I want. Everything else in here, the cookie and whatnot, was already here. What I can do next is take the same request and modify it even further. There's a lot of things here that maybe don't matter. The language, this maybe CFR tokens matter, maybe they don't matter. I can test it out. How do I test it out? I would go into Postman. So that's my next advancement to this is go into postman.com, create a free account. And what you can do is you can actually put in the entire API request from the curl command that we got and just paste it in the get command here. And all the headers and everything just pre-populate by themselves. Now what you can do is you can manipulate these things. You can create variables. So what I've done is I've created a variable called plate, put the word hacker in there, created a variable called state, and now I can modify this and use it globally everywhere. I can just send the request. And I send it, I see, oh, it's a Nissan Versa with the Arizona plate because I had that here. Now I can just quickly change this to, let's say, I don't know, Alabama plate number, send it, and cool, I have a Hyundai Genesis. So I'm bypassing the whole website, O'Reilly Autos and stuff. I don't need to go through this interface, the front end. I can just access the API directly. And you don't have to pay for this. This is why I said abuse/use this API. I'm not really abusing it. I just found a way to bypass the front end and go straight to the middleware or the API to access the information. And I've done this for many, many other places. I've done this with Carvana, with Kelly Blue Book. They all have something similar. They're likely paying for this stuff. They're paying some data broker to access this API. I'm not. I'm just pinging the website, Carvana or O'Reilly directly, and I'm just piggybacking off of them to get to the information that I want. Now, mind you, I'm not abusing this stuff. I'm not scraping it, and I'm just not going crazy with this. And don't, because you'll get throttled, you'll get banned and stuff. My purpose is OSINT. My purpose is to do things faster, get a plate number, get a resolution from a plate to a VIN to maybe something else, faster than cop scan, faster than anyone else, so that I can solve cases, solve crime, help people. So the intention is good here, and that's why you shouldn't abuse something like this. When you do, it's going to get blocked eventually. But that's kind of the surface version of this. Now there's absolute legit versions where you can buy the API for the sources here. That's beyond the scope of this talk, but you can also apply for APIs. For example, the UK has an API, the UK government. Let's test that API. That API is the website here. It's like driver-vehicle-licensing.api.gov.uk. So it's from a legit source, and you can email them. They'll give you an API key. Now, with that key, let me test it. So let's Google UK vehicles and James Bond movie. And I find a bunch of license plate numbers here. Let's pick on a car that I do recognize. Let's say this one. That's an Aston Martin. And I can see the plate number is KE02EWW. So in my, Postman.com, I actually have this API set up here with everything. And in the body of the request, I just have to change this. So KE02, was it EWW? All right. And I send this request, and I get a reply back which says it's an Aston Martin and the details of the vehicle. Now, it doesn't show me who owns the vehicle or other stuff. It shows me when it was registered, when its registry is expiring. It has already expired. But there are other APIs on the website that do give you registration information, like who owns it and stuff. I just haven't configured it yet. So you have to play around with all of these stuff, and you can take it to the next level. And the goal of this is just to bypass a lot of the front end mess, you can speed things up and really take it to the next level. So the next level here is automating some of this stuff. So let me show you how I would automate this. Kelly Blue Book is another source of this. So if I go here, and they have an instant cash offer link here, and I can put in a plate number here, state, same scenario here. It'll give me a VIN number, in fact, not just the vehicle, but also VIN number. I can actually automate this process using Burp Suite or something like Cato. Cato is an alternative to Burp Suite. Let me show you this in Cato. So let me fire up my virtual machine here. This is Kali Linux running. And what I've done is, for the sake of time, I've already captured the traffic. I went to the page. This is the request that the page sends, and I'm going to modify the request now. So it was the hacker plate, and let's say code, which is the state is LA, Louisiana, and I hit send, and it gives me a reply back. This is the reply. It gives me a VIN number. So let me show you a way I can automate this. How can I go through all the possible entries here to get my results? So simple thing. Instead of, let's say, the plate number of hacker, I'll put a plate number called Khan. I want to see which state has the plate number Khan. So maybe I want a vanity plate number. Or let's say the opposite, which states don't have one, and maybe I can register that plate number there. So I replaced the CA California with a variable, and I want to go through all the list of 50 states here. A quick way to get that list is just go to any AI-based tool like lumo.proton.me and just ask it. Give me a CSV list of all the US states. It gave me a list, and I can say, just the abbreviations, and essentially what I did was I just copied this and pasted it in here in the list. Now I have a whole list that it's going to iterate through. It's going to go through that list. And I actually went through that list for the sake of time. And it got me 50 results. And some results give me a VIN number in the response, others don't. I can see some gave me a blank field here, and others actually gave me a VIN number. So I can actually then filter this down through a query request. I can do a filter like look at the response, look at the raw response. Does it contain value, which is VIN? And all of them have that value. And I think this one had a colon next to it. Let's see, it didn't. Let's look at the response one more time. So here's where you have to mess around. So it's a, what do you call a quote here, but the quote has to be an escape character. So escape character quote. There we go. 33 requests show up. So 33 states have that plate number in it. And I can do the opposite of this. Count contains, and I can do not contains, and I get 17 requests. So here's the states, like Wyoming does not have a plate with the word Khan in it. So maybe I can go to Wyoming and register a plate, and I'll have a vanity plate number there. So simple technique to disclose a lot of information. And then obviously from here, I can take the plate number, I can tack on multiple results and bind them together, but a lot can be done. So I speak fast because I have little time to show you all these exciting things, but APIs open up a whole world of opportunities for digging for information, either free, either paid APIs or private APIs where you get the key. I just use all the free APIs and there are hundreds. So let me show you a list of all these APIs. Just go on GitHub and search for public APIs, and you'll find a lot of repositories which show you what type of public APIs exist. Financial, events, email-based, health. Let's click on a few like government. Multiple different countries with APIs. Some require authentication, some don't. I think this list is all a free list. I've tried quite a few. Some work, some don't. Some are old results, but there's quite a few mentioned here. And I think an even better one is this one, Cypher 387 has a repository of APIs for OSINT specifically. And these are a lot, like geo IPs and whois lookups. You can either have free results or maybe a certain number of requests. You can create multiple accounts. There's quite a few options for IP addresses, for domains, for vehicles, for GPS coordinates, data scraping, open corporates. I actually applied for this API yesterday and they rejected me. It says it was free for nonprofits and journalists and investigators. I'm like, hey, I'm an investigator, but somehow they rejected me because maybe I used alias information, that's why. But anyways, try your luck with a lot of these places. There's the techniques. So remember, discover an API just using the right click and in inspect tab and look at the network traffic here. It won't be as simple as this every single time. Sometimes there'll be multiple post requests, not just a get request, but figure it out. That's the fun part. And then try to repeat it using Postman and play around with all the fields here, what you need, what you don't need, parameters, body of the request, and stuff like that. And then try to automate it using maybe Cato or command line. You can literally do stuff in a bash script and you'll get a lot of results from there. So discover, recreate, automate, and then use it for good. Use it for investigations. Don't abuse these. I've tried to automate some of the other ones, but I either get throttled. So it's great. It's a great learning experience. Like, hey, why is Carvana throttling my requests? How quickly can I request them? All right, maybe one every 5 seconds or one a minute or whatever. Each one will have their own limitations. You get to learn about API requests, calls, variables, different things that are required in the headers. And you also know about API security because of this, because some of them will throttle your results, some of them will expire a token, others will require the refer to be a certain website and it won't work if you remove that. So it's a great learning experience. This is the reverse engineering style of learning API security. And I found it very fun because now I'm all into this and As I started doing this, I'm like, oh, social media has some APIs. You can check if someone has a Snapchat account or an Adobe account just by going to this auth.service.adobe and then having certain headers in place and a body request that says username, email, whatever, and you get a response. So it's fun. It's fun knowing how websites work, what their replies are, and it teaches you a lot about security. So that's basically the point I wanted to get across. And the last, I'll take 2 more minutes to kind of go through some of the other things you can do besides just this. So you can unveil a lot of APIs, not directly, but indirectly. So I showed you the GitHub method of doing things and some of the skills that were required, Postman, network tab, and a little bit of coding. But there's places where you won't be able to get the APIs. And those places are like for hunting for financial fraud, for example. You know an API exists in these payment apps. You won't be able to see it, manipulate it because they use a lot of middleware and stuff, but you can still use it. You can still use the same concept. For example, Zelle. I use this often where I'll put in the email address in a bank. Let's say this is Citibank's interface. Most banks have Zelle. I'll put it in and it'll say not enrolled in Zelle. All right, cool. I'll put in another email address that is enrolled in Zelle and it'll resolve it to the actual name. And I know that this is the real name of the person or the organization that holds that email address because it's gone through KYC, know your customer. So they're using their own APIs and their own backend methods to give you verified information. So this is a cool way to kind of go through this. I'm not sending them $1. I just press cancel after that, but I get to see this resolution from name, from email to actual name of the person. And my curiosity says, where else can I do this with financial apps? Maybe PayPal. PayPal shows me from an username to an email. And if you have an email, it'll show you 5 digits of a phone number. Like that's a lot of information they're leaking. It's not just the last 2 digits of a phone number, it's five. That's 50% of your phone number they're showing if you just have an email address to start off with. So little things count when you're doing an investigation. Maybe you had half the phone number or the partial digits and you're like, oh, this matches that. So must be the same person. Or a username results to an actual name. Now, if you inspect the network tab every time you're doing this, you see API calls, but they're masked, they're hard to replicate, and they're not easy to do. So in those cases, I access them indirectly. Venmo is the same. You can see actual transfers, they paid money for a Ferrari or some comic fest and whatever. So they're showing you that data right up front. So explore these options, and there's additional resources available for all of this, but have fun with it. Use the new data for good, and I'll open it up for the last few minutes for any questions that may be in the chat. But thank you.
We do have one question here from
Mhm.
Jeremy. It says, do you have some advice on how to exploit APIs for OSINT purposes and be sure that the found technique doesn't alert the target? So, for example, when you're doing the password reset
Hmm.
techniques.
Yeah, good question. Because if you use the interface, sometimes yes, it alerts the target, or a lot of the techniques do. So we want to have a no-touch experience when we're doing OSINT. It's just view only. It's not interrogating accounts. A lot of the APIs allow you to do that. So there's a bunch of GitHub tools like Olihi and Epios and stuff, which look at an email address and see where else has this been registered. If you do it the manual way, which is the front end method, and do a password reset, sometimes you're right, they get in notification that your password has been reset. But if you inspect their code, some of these GitHub repos, they've actually done the hard work and going through and they're like, all right, what's that API that gets called? Using that method, they're not alerted that someone's interrogating our accounts to get more information. So I don't have a lot of specific examples in the little time I have, but a lot of them have it. So I showed Snapchat and Adobe. I figured out there's a way to do that, but I'm not sure in the front end if it's easier as well. But yes, it's trial and error. So every time you're trying this, do it on your own accounts with
Yep.
the API and everything. And if your own accounts succeed and one or two other of your alias accounts, everything's fine and dandy, then use it for OSINT. Otherwise, don't use it.
Great advice. We have another question here. Say I'm building a list of APIs and tools to access them. What is the rate of turnover that I should expect to have to update and change?
It really depends on the API itself. So if it's like just a free API that you got using one of these techniques that I showed, yeah, it most likely will change. If you start abusing it or using it too much, they see a log. They see you're pulling it from your IP address, even if you're using a VPN or whatnot. They see it's not coming from a legit front end source. So they may block the request. They may somehow throttle it or whatever. It happens all the time. That's why you have to constantly be on top of it. But if you're using like paid APIs or requesting an API that's unique to you, sure, that's a much more stable technique to do this. And those are the techniques I would encourage you to do. Most of the API access that I have in my list are with API keys. They give me a username and a password, and I use it that way.
That was an amazing session, super informative. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.